My name is Nathan, 35 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, working as a senior software architect for a major tech company. My father, Henry, always dreamed I'd work in this field. He wasn't tech savvy, but he had a forward thinking vision. I still remember him patting my shoulder when I got accepted into the computer science program at the University of Oregon, saying, "Technology is the future, son. Seize it." My father ran a small but reputable construction company in Portland. He started from nothing in the 1980s with just an old pickup truck and a set of tools. My mother said they lived in a tiny apartment back then, saving every penny to get ahead. But my father never lost faith. He used to say, "Building isn't just about houses, it's about building trust." That mindset carried him through the toughest days. By the 1990s, my father's company became well known for restoring historic homes. He had a knack for preserving their heritage while adding modern comforts. He was always honest with clients, never promising what he couldn't deliver, and treated his workers like family. During the 2008 financial crisis, when many companies laid off staff, my father kept his entire team. He even pawned his beloved 1965 Ford Mustang to cover payroll. "Employees are extended family," he told me. "Take care of them, and they'll take care of your business." I learned so much from him. When I became a team lead at my company, I applied his management style, building trust with colleagues, focusing on the smallest details. Those lessons helped me guide my team through challenging projects. I met Emily, my wife, at a tech event in college. She was studying business administration, with a smile that made me forget those late-night coding sessions. My father liked her immediately. He grinned and said, "This girl keeps you grounded. Don't let her slip away." After graduation, he even helped Emily start her own marketing firm, connecting her with his contacts and sharing how he secured contracts. My parents' home was my father's greatest pride. It's a craftsman-style house in one of Portland's old neighborhoods, bought with earnings from his first big construction project, a high-profile renovation that put his company on the map. He treated that house like a work of art. The porch is made of oak, every plank hand-picked by him. In the garage, he turned it into a small workshop where every tool was neatly arranged, each with its own labeled spot. He taught me everything there, from how to use a power saw to how to live responsibly. "Everything has its place, Nathan," he'd say. "Respect that." On weekends, my father and I spent hours in the workshop, fixing up his Mustang. He bought it when I was a kid, saying it'd be a project to bring us closer. It wasn't just about the car, it was about lessons in patience. He'd tell me, "Don't take shortcuts. Do it right the first time, even if it takes longer." We documented every step, taking photos of each part, like a visual diary. Those moments shaped who I am, from how I tackle problems at work to how I view life. Everything started to unravel when my father, Henry, passed away from a sudden heart attack. He was only 58. That day, I was at the office, in the middle of a tense meeting about a new project. My phone buzzed, and I saw my mother's number. She rarely called during work hours, so I had a bad feeling. I stepped out into the hallway and heard my mother's choked voice over the phone. "Nathan, your father, he collapsed at the work site." I rushed to the hospital, but when I got there, the doctor just shook his head. My father was gone. It felt like the ground had crumbled beneath me. The days that followed were like a nightmare. My father's funeral was packed. Old clients, employees, even a few of his competitors from Portland showed up. They shared stories I'd never heard. How my father helped a carpenter pay for his daughter's college, how he stayed up all night with an employee going through a family crisis, how he taught apprentices how to restore antique wood for free. I realized he wasn't just my father, he was a vital part of this community. My father always planned meticulously. A week after the funeral, his lawyer, Mr. Thomas, called my mother and me to his office. He handed us a thick stack of documents, carefully annotated by my father, like a perfect blueprint for the future. The craftsman house in the old neighborhood, the construction company, the savings account, everything was left to me. Mr. Thomas said, "I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone draft a will as thorough as your father's." Among the documents, I found a letter he wrote to me. It read, "Nathan, you're the keeper of what we've built. Do what's right, even when it's hard." Reading those words, I felt both proud and overwhelmed. My mother fell apart after my father's death. She barely left her room in the early days. Emily, my wife, stopped by often, bringing food and sitting with her for hours. Then one day, my mother said she wanted to try a grief support group at the church nearby. I supported her immediately, thinking she needed a place to share her pain. There, she met Stephen, a 60-year-old widower who'd lost his wife a few years earlier. At first, she mentioned him casually, like a friend. She'd say, "Stephen told me about a great book on coping with loss," or "Stephen says this emptiness will pass." I was glad she had someone to talk to, though Emily reminded me that everyone processes grief differently. But things moved faster than I expected. Just 6 months after my father's death, my mother announced that Stephen was moving in with her. He had 2 grown children from his previous marriage, James, 28, and Sarah, 30. I tried to be understanding, but deep down, I felt uneasy. My mother was changing so much. She cut her hair short, started wearing clothes she'd never have chosen before. The flower garden my father had helped her plant in the backyard was dug up, replaced with a modern seating area. When I asked about it, she just said, "I need a fresh start, Nathan." The stories about my father, the memories she used to share with a smile, were now almost gone. My family started to worry. My Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, pulled me aside during a family gathering. She said, "Your mother's trying to fill the void your father left. Are you sure she's okay?" I didn't know how to respond. I wanted my mother to be happy, but every time I stepped into my father's house, it felt like he was being erased. Emily told me to give my mother time, but I couldn't stop thinking about my father's letter. "Keep what we've built," he wrote. I wondered if I was keeping that promise when everything he left behind was slipping away. I never imagined things could spiral so quickly. After Stephen moved into my father's house in Portland, he started acting like he owned the place. The craftsman home, where my father Henry poured his heart and soul, now felt like a foreign construction zone. One weekend, I dropped by to see my mother unannounced. When I walked in, I froze workers were tearing down the oak bookshelves my father had handcrafted in the living room. Those shelves were the last project we worked on together, every notch holding a memory. I asked Stephen what was going on, and he shrugged, saying, "This house needs modernizing, Nathan. Those old shelves were just taking up space." His tone dripped with dismissal, as if my father's effort meant nothing. I turned to my mother, hoping she'd say something, but she just stood there, nodding along with Stephen. "I think he's right," she said. "Stephen knows about these things. Don't make a big deal out of it." I reminded her that I'm the legal owner and any changes need my approval. She sighed. "Nathan, don't be so sensitive. Stephen and I just want the house to look better." Hearing her say that felt like a betrayal. The woman who once proudly showed off my father's shelves to friends now treated them like trash. It didn't stop there. James, Stephen's son, turned my father's tidy garage workshop into a gym. That space, once filled with my father's meticulously organized tools where he taught me life lessons, was now cluttered with weights and a treadmill. Worse, I found out James held a garage sale while I was away on a business trip, selling off nearly all of my father's tools from his power saw to his hammer, the things he used to teach me precision. When I confronted him, James just laughed. "Old junk, man. Who uses that stuff anymore?" I tried to stay calm, but inside I was burning. Sarah, Stephen's daughter, wasn't any better. She repainted the entire master bedroom, turning the warm wood tones my father chose into a cold gray. The oak floors he spent months restoring were ripped out for cheap vinyl. She called it a style upgrade. I tried talking to my mother, bringing along the notebook my father left, where he detailed every renovation decision for the house. But she brushed it off. "Nathan, I don't want to live in the past. You need to let things move forward." Stephen took it even further. One evening after dinner, he pulled me aside and said with smug confidence, "Nathan, your mother and I live here. We're putting money into renovations, so I think our names should be on the deed. Fair's fair, right?" I was stunned. I reminded him that I cover all the costs, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and they haven't contributed a dime beyond unauthorized changes. My father paid off the house years ago. They're living there for free. But Stephen just smirked. "You're young. You don't get how families work yet." Emily noticed I was getting more stressed every time I visited my mother's place. She said, "Nathan, maybe we should cut back on going over for a while. With Sophia here, she needs happy parents." Sophia, our daughter, had just turned 1. Emily was right, but when I stopped showing up as often, Stephen pushed harder. He started sending me bills, demanding I pay for renovations. I never approved from paint to new lighting. I refused, but he kept at it, acting like I owed him. Aunt Margaret called me one day, telling me to ease up and let my mother live her new life. I tried explaining my father's will, my responsibility to the house, but she cut me off. "Stephen makes your mother happy. Why can't you let them do what they want with the place?" I started wondering if I was being too stubborn. But then I remembered my father's letter. "Do what's right, even when it's hard. The house wasn't just property, it was my father's legacy, built with his entire life. I knew I couldn't stand by and watch it be erased any further. Things finally reached a breaking point. The Craftsman house in Portland, my father Henry's legacy, felt like a stranger's home. Stephen and his two kids, James and Sarah, didn't just stop at unauthorized renovations, they acted like I had no say in my own house. But the final straw came one afternoon when I discovered they'd sanded off my height marks on the kitchen door frame. Starting when I was 3, every birthday, my father would measure me, marking the date in black ink. Those were my clearest memories of him. I asked my mother, my voice shaking, "Why did you let them do this?" She looked at me coldly and said, "It's just an old door frame, Nathan. You can't hold on to everything your father touched." And I drove home and sat in my garage on the one chair I'd managed to keep from my father's furniture. It felt like he was being wiped out of my mother's life, out of the house he cherished. I called Emily and poured out everything. She listened, then said gently, "Nathan, you need to make a clear decision. Your father left the house to you because he trusted you. Don't let this go too far." Her words woke me up. I realized I'd been trying to compromise for too long, and all it cost me was pieces of my father's memory. I met with Mr. Thomas, my father's lawyer, and a financial advisor. They showed me a new perspective. Portland's housing market had skyrocketed. Renting out the house could generate enough to fund a college savings plan for Sophia, our little girl. The idea brought both relief and pain relief that I could secure my daughter's future, but pain at the thought of letting go of my father's home. I decided to talk to my mother, hoping she'd understand. But when I brought up renting, she screamed over the phone, "Nathan, you can't kick me out of my house. This is my home." I tried explaining that I was just exploring options, that I'd been covering all the costs, taxes, maintenance, insurance, but she wouldn't listen. She talked about Stephen's efforts, about changes I never approved. An hour later, Stephen called. Gone was his usual smug tone. He growled, "Listen, Nathan, we've built a life here. You can't tear it apart because you miss your dad." When I reminded him the house is legally mine, he cut in. "We've put sweat into this place. You owe us ownership." I hung up, my blood boiling. The next day, I drove to my mother's house. When I walked in, I saw Stephen and James directing workers to rip out the antique wood trim in the dining room carvings my father spent weeks perfecting to match the house's craftsman style. I stood there watching the wood hit the floor, feeling like my father was being insulted right in front of me. I took a deep breath and said, my voice calm but firm, "Mom, Stephen, you have 2 weeks to find a new place to live. This is my house and I'm taking it back." My mother burst into tears immediately. She clutched her face, calling me a heartless son, saying I was destroying her happiness. Stephen was different. He stepped forward, pointing at me. "You think you can just throw us out on the street? We have a whole community here, church, friends, work. You can't do this." James and Sarah jumped in too, with Sarah clutching her pregnant belly, claiming I was stressing her and her unborn child. "Don't you care about your half-sister?" she said. I fired back, my voice steady. "Sarah, you're not my sister, and your pregnancy doesn't change my ownership." The argument ended in tears and accusations. As I left, my mother was still sobbing, and Stephen glared at me like he wanted to tear me apart. On the drive home, I called Emily. She just said, "You did the right thing, Nathan. Your father would be proud." But inside, I wasn't sure. I was protecting my father's legacy, but at what cost? A fractured family. My father's words echoed in my head. Do what's right, even when it's hard. I gripped the steering wheel, telling myself not to waver. The 2 weeks I gave my mother and Stephen to move out were the longest of my life. Every day was an emotional battle. My mother called constantly, sometimes crying, sometimes yelling into the phone. "Nathan, I'm your mother. How could you treat me like this?" she'd say, her voice breaking. Some days, she'd bring up how she changed my diapers, as if to guilt me. I tried explaining that I was just protecting the house my father, Henry, left me, but she wouldn't listen. She called me selfish, saying I was ruining the happiness she'd fought so hard to rebuild. Stephen switched tactics. Instead of threats, he tried negotiating. He called, offering to sign a lease and pay monthly rent. "We can handle this like adults, Nathan," he said, his tone falsely conciliatory. But I didn't trust him. After everything destroying the bookshelves, erasing my height marks, selling my father's tools, I doubted they'd respect any agreement. I declined, and he hung up, not before muttering, "You'll regret this." I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 3 days before the deadline, I got a text from Aunt Margaret. Nathan, come to your mother's house now. We need to talk. And I drove to the Craftsman house in Portland, unaware I was walking into a trap. When I arrived, a crowd was gathered on the front lawn, my mother's church friends, distant relatives, even Mr. David, my father's old business partner. My mother stood in the center, eyes red, flanked by Stephen and Sarah, who was clutching her pregnant belly. James lingered behind, glaring at me. They called it a family meeting, but it felt like a trial. My mother started, her voice trembling. Nathan, you're tearing this family apart. Your father would be so disappointed. Then the church pastor spoke, preaching about honoring parents, saying I was going against morality. Mr. David, who once worked with my father, shared stories of my father's kindness, as if I were betraying his legacy. Sarah sobbed, hand on her belly, claiming the stress could harm her baby. Nathan, how can you do this to this child? She said, though I had no connection to her. The crowd stared at me, some shaking their heads, others whispering among themselves. I stood there feeling like the whole world was against me. Part of me wanted to get up and walk away, but then I thought of my father. He once told me, "Stand firm when you know you're right, Nathan." I took a deep breath, stood up, and started speaking. I told them about my father, how he poured his heart into building this house, about the bookshelves, the wood trim, the workshop, all destroyed without my permission. I pulled out my phone, showing everyone photos of Stephen's changes. Cheap vinyl flooring replacing my father's oak, cold gray paint erasing his warm tones. Then I read my father's letter, every word clear. Nathan, you're the keeper of what we've built. Do what's right. Silence fell over the crowd. Mr. David nodded, as if he understood. A few church friends looked down, some quietly apologized before leaving. My mother said nothing, just turned and went inside, followed by Stephen and Sarah. The meeting dissolved, but I knew it wasn't over. On the final day, I arrived at the house with Mr. Thomas and a locksmith. I'd hired a security company as a precaution, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. The house was empty when I stepped inside. My mother, Stephen, James, and Sarah had moved out, leaving a few boxes in the garage. Stephen couldn't resist a final jab as he got into his car. Happy now, Nathan? Your father must be real proud seeing you kick your own mother out. I didn't respond. My mother didn't even look at me, just sat silently in the car, staring out the window. After they left, I walked through the house. Every new paint streak, every vinyl floor tile, every piece of removed wood felt like a reminder of how deeply my father's legacy had been harmed. But I didn't regret it. My father entrusted the house to me because he believed I'd protect it. I called Emily and told her everything. She said, "You did the right thing, Nathan. Sophia will grow up in a home filled with her grandfather's love." I clutched my father's letter, telling myself I'd chosen the path he wanted, no matter how much it hurt. After my mother, Stephen, and his kids left, the Craftsman house in Portland felt eerily quiet. I stood in the living room where my father Henry's laughter once echoed, now filled only with the sound of emptiness. Every corner bore scars of unauthorized changes, cheap vinyl flooring where my father's carefully restored oak once lay, antique wood trim torn out, the garage workshop where I learned everything from him now a cluttered mess of discarded junk. I didn't cry, but my heart was heavy. This was my father's house, the legacy he entrusted to me, and I'd taken it back. But the cost was steeper than I'd ever imagined. I called Mr. Thomas, my father's lawyer, to document the damage. He walked through with me, photographing every detail, from the gray-painted walls to the violated floors. "You could sue for property damage, he said. But I shook my head. I didn't want to drag out this drama any further. I just wanted to close this painful chapter and start repairing what was left. Mr. Thomas nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Your father would be proud, Nathan. You did the hardest thing." I reached out to Mr. David, my father's old business partner, who'd worked with him on historic home restorations. He connected me with a team of skilled craftsmen, some of whom had apprenticed under my father. They came to the house, looked around, and shook their heads in regret. "Henry wouldn't be happy seeing the place like this," an older craftsman said. But then he smiled and said, "Don't worry. We'll help you bring it back to what it should be." We started with the workshop in the garage, the place where my father taught me about wood, patience, and life. I wanted it to be where Sophia, my little girl, would learn about her grandfather, even though she's only just over a year old. My mother is staying with Aunt Margaret now. I hear she's doing okay, but she doesn't call me anymore. Most of the family has cut contact, except for a few who occasionally send reproachful texts. On social media, Sarah and James keep posting about the mother kicked out by her son, complete with photos of my mother looking sad by a window. At first, those posts got a lot of sympathetic comments, but over time, they've faded from attention. Maybe people are starting to see through it, or maybe they're just tired of the story. I don't care much either way. I'm too exhausted from explaining that I'm not the villain. Emily has been my rock through it all. Whenever I doubt my decision, she pulls out my father's letter and reads it line by line. "Nathan, you're the keeper of what we've built," she says. "You're not just saving the house, you're keeping your promise to your father. That's what Sophia will be proud of when she grows up." Her words are like a lighthouse in my darkest moments. Together, we've planned the restoration, step by step. The oak floors will be redone, the antique trim will be recreated, and I found a craftsman who promised to rebuild the bookshelf exactly as my father made it. The house will never be exactly as it was. Some scars can't be erased. But I've learned that protecting my father's legacy isn't just about preserving every piece of wood, it's about preserving his spirit, his precision, his integrity, his belief in doing what's right. I've started writing a notebook, like my father used to, documenting the restoration process. I want to leave it for Sophia, so one day she'll understand how her grandfather lived and loved. The Portland community still whispers about me. Some of my father's old friends, who came to his funeral, now look at me with guarded eyes. Some say I've tarnished his reputation by kicking my mother out. But Mr. David, who knew my father better than most, told me, "Henry always put truth above feelings. You did what he would have done." His words eased my heart, if only a little. I know I've lost relationships, maybe forever, but I can live with that because I kept my promise to my father. One evening, as Sophia slept in Emily's arms, I sat in the workshop, slowly being rebuilt, holding my father's letter and whispering, "I did it, Dad." As he once said, integrity is doing what's right, even when it hurts. I believe he'd understand. Now I look forward. The house will be where Sophia grows up, where she hears stories about her grandfather, the man who built not just homes, but lasting values. I'll tell her about my father, the workshop, the Mustang he loved, and I'll teach her what he taught me. Everything has its place, and it's our job to respect that.